My wife suggested an open marriage. I agreed out of fear, logged the betrayal, filed for divorce, won in court, and reclaimed my life and dignity. We had just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just leftovers from the night before. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table with this serious look on her face. At first I thought maybe she wanted to talk about the loan I was supposed to co-sign for her business expansion. That's where my head was at, numbers, interest rates, timelines. I wasn't even close to prepared for what she actually said. She started with, "I need to talk to you about something important." I put my fork down and gave her my full attention. The way she avoided eye contact made my stomach sink a little, like I already knew I wasn't going to like where this was going. And then, out of nowhere, she hit me with it. "I think we should consider opening our marriage." I laughed, not because I thought it was funny, but because I honestly thought she was joking. I waited for her to crack a smile or give some sort of hint that she wasn't serious, but it never came. She just stared at me with this weird mixture of nervousness and determination. I asked her to repeat herself, hoping maybe I had just misheard, but no. She said it again, clear as day. "I think we should try an open marriage." My first reaction was disbelief. I must have asked her 3 or 4 times if she was actually serious. Each time she nodded and explained how she'd been thinking about it for a while. According to her, our relationship wasn't bad, but it had just become too predictable. She said it was like eating the same meal every single day. It was good, but sometimes you just crave something different. That food comparison really stuck with me. It felt so casual, like she was talking about switching up a dinner menu instead of rewriting the rules of our marriage. I asked her if this was some kind of ultimatum, and she said no. But the way she looked at me made it clear that no didn't exactly mean no. I tried to keep my cool, but my mind was racing. Was I not enough for her anymore? Had I missed some kind of sign? I thought back to every moment we'd shared recently, every kiss, every laugh, and wondered if she had been faking it the whole time. When I finally asked her why now, why this, she said it had nothing to do with me. She insisted it wasn't about dissatisfaction, but rather about exploring new experiences. Apparently, some of the women she worked with had shared stories about their own arrangements, and the idea had been sitting in her head ever since. That was another thing that stung. The fact that this wasn't some deeply personal realization she'd had, it was something she'd picked up from gossip at work. I wanted to be mad at her, but mostly I just felt confused. She told me it wouldn't be one-sided. She wasn't asking for freedom just for herself. I'd have the same opportunities to see other people if I wanted, like that was supposed to make me feel better. I remember asking her, "What if I say no?" She just sat there for a second before finally saying, "Then I won't be happy." That was the part that broke me. It wasn't even what she said, it was how she said it. Like her happiness suddenly depended on whether I was willing to change everything about our relationship. I didn't give her an answer that night. I told her I needed time to process it, and she said that was fine, but the way she acted afterward, calm, almost detached, made it clear she thought she'd already won, like she had planted the seed and just needed to wait for me to come around. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in my head over and over again. No matter how many ways I looked at it, I kept coming back to the same thought. This wasn't something you could undo. Once you crossed that line, there was no going back. And yet part of me couldn't stop wondering, what if she was right? What if this was exactly what we needed? That question haunted me more than anything else. I woke up the next morning hoping the whole thing had been some weird dream, but it wasn't. She acted completely normal, like we hadn't just ripped open the foundation of our marriage the night before. I couldn't tell if that made it better or worse. Part of me wanted her to be as shaken up as I was, but instead she made coffee and sat scrolling through her phone like any other morning. I spent most of that day at work pretending to focus, but my mind kept circling back to our conversation. I wanted to believe this was something we could talk through, that maybe she'd see how unfair it felt, or maybe I'd find a way to convince her that what we had was worth protecting. But every time I pictured her face when she said, "Then I won't be happy," I felt like I had already lost. When I got home, she was waiting for me. Not in a pushy way, but it was obvious she wanted an answer. I hadn't prepared one. I tried stalling, asking more questions about what this was really about, what she thought it would fix, and if there was even the slightest chance she'd change her mind. She didn't budge. Instead, she told me she had already set some boundaries to make things easier. She said we needed rules to keep things fair, no bringing people home, no sleeping with mutual friends, no talking about details unless we both agreed it was okay. She had it all mapped out, like she'd been preparing for this longer than she let on. I asked her if she had someone specific in mind already. That question hit a nerve. She swore up and down that she didn't, but the way she got defensive made it hard to believe. I think that's when I realized how out of control I felt. She'd been planning this, and I was just scrambling to keep up. The worst part? I said yes. I didn't want to. Everything in me screamed not to, but I couldn't shake the fear that saying no meant losing her completely. And after 11 years together, the idea of walking away felt impossible. So I agreed, not because I wanted to, but because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't. She looked so relieved when I said it. That hurt more than anything else, that she could smile and thank me like I'd just done her a favor. I wanted to scream at her, to make her understand how much it was killing me inside, but instead I nodded and let her hug me like everything was fine. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that maybe she'd get whatever this was out of her system and come back to me. I even convinced myself that agreeing to it would somehow prove how much I loved her, like that would be enough to make her realize she didn't need anyone else. But it didn't feel like love. It felt like survival, like I was just trying to keep my head above water long enough to figure out what to do next. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got, not just at her but at myself. I hated how easily I let her push me into this. I hated how she got to be excited about the possibilities while I was stuck dreading what came next. And most of all, I hated the little voice in my head that kept whispering, "What if you end up liking it too?" I tried to bury that thought, but it kept creeping back in. Because as much as I hated the idea of sharing her, part of me wondered what it would feel like to let go, to stop worrying about making her happy and focus on myself for once. I didn't tell her any of that, of course. I just kept my mouth shut and played along, hoping I'd figure things out before it was too late. But deep down I already knew the damage was done. We'd crossed a line, and there was no way to erase it. The first few weeks were a blur. I was just going through the motions, trying to act like everything was fine when it wasn't. She, on the other hand, seemed energized, like she had just unlocked some new version of herself. She started going out more, dressing up in ways she hadn't in years. At first I pretended not to notice, but it was impossible to ignore how much effort she was putting into her appearance, effort she hadn't shown for me in a long time. I tried to keep my head down and focus on work, but it was eating me alive. Every time she left the house, I found myself wondering where she was going, who she was meeting, and what they were doing. I hated how obsessed I became, but I couldn't help it. It felt like I was losing her one night at a time. Then something shifted. It happened after a long day at work. I stayed late to finish grading some papers, and a CO worker, a professor from another department, stopped by my office. We'd worked in the same building for years but never really talked outside of work. That night, though, we ended up having this long conversation about research, career goals, and everything in between. It wasn't flirty or inappropriate, just easy. But when I left the office, I realized I felt lighter than I had in weeks, and that feeling stuck with me. Over the next few days, I started opening up more, talking to people I'd usually just exchange polite nods with, and actually making an effort to connect. I wasn't trying to play the game or get even with my wife. I just needed something to pull me out of the hole I'd been sinking into. It worked. Conversations turned into drinks after work. Drinks turned into invites to events and gatherings. And before I knew it, I had built this whole new social circle, a group of people who didn't see me as just someone's husband, but as someone interesting on my own. The confidence boost was immediate. I wasn't sitting around waiting for my wife to come home anymore. I had plans, connections, and, whether I wanted to admit it or not, options. Of course she noticed. At first, she seemed happy for me, asking about the people I was meeting and the things I was doing, but that didn't last long. The more I built this new version of myself, the more uncomfortable she got. The breaking point came when I got invited to a conference. It was out of town, and one of the women I'd been spending time with, strictly professional by the way, was giving a presentation there. She asked if I wanted to come along, and I said yes. I don't think I'll ever forget the look on my wife's face when I told her. She didn't yell or accuse me of anything, but the silence that followed spoke louder than words. It was like, for the first time, she saw me as someone who didn't need her approval. The conference was amazing. I made connections that opened up doors for my career and got to experience what it felt like to be seen as someone valuable outside of my marriage. When I came back, she was waiting for me, and I could tell something had shifted for her too. She didn't ask about the conference itself, just the people I met. Specifically the woman who had invited me. I answered her questions honestly, but the tension was undeniable. From that point on, it felt like the dynamic had flipped. She started questioning where I was going, who I was spending time with, and why I was suddenly so busy. The confidence she had when this whole thing started was gone, and in its place was insecurity I hadn't seen in her before. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it a little. After all the nights I spent wondering if she was with someone else, it felt almost satisfying to watch her squirm for a change. But that satisfaction didn't last long, because even as I was building something better for myself, I knew we were drifting further apart. And as much as I wanted to keep pretending this was just a phase we could come back from, I was starting to realize that I didn't want to go back. Not anymore. At first, she just seemed more interested in my schedule, when I'd be home, where I was going, and who I'd be with. She tried to keep it casual, but it was obvious she was fishing for information. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, she had pushed for this arrangement, so maybe she was just adjusting to seeing me actually enjoy it. But then it got more obvious. She started asking specific questions, names, how I met certain people, what we talked about. It wasn't curiosity, it was insecurity, and I could feel it creeping in every time we spoke. One night, I came home later than usual. I had been out grabbing drinks with a group of colleagues, including one of the women I'd met through the conference. Nothing inappropriate happened, but my wife didn't see it that way. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, arms crossed. Eyes locked on me the second I stepped through the door. "Who were you with?" she asked. I told her. No details, just the basics. TO workers, drinks, normal stuff. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted specifics. Who sat next to me? How long we stayed? Did I talk to any of the women there? I didn't lose my temper, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to be interrogated. She didn't like that. What happened to being honest with each other? She snapped. I reminded her that honesty didn't mean micromanaging each other's lives. That was the whole point of this open marriage idea, right? Freedom. No strings. She didn't have an answer for that. She just sat there looking like she was about to cry, and then hit me with, "I don't think I want to do this anymore." I couldn't stop myself from laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Of course she didn't want this anymore, not now that I was the one thriving and she was the one stuck, at home wondering what I was up to. But I didn't say that. Instead, I asked her why. She said it wasn't what she thought it would be. She said she missed what we had before and hated how distant we'd become. She even admitted that she thought opening the marriage would make us closer somehow, like adding excitement would fix whatever was missing. I let her talk. I let her pour her heart out about how scared she was of losing me and how she regretted ever suggesting this in the first place. But all I could think about was how easy it had been for her to flip that switch when it suited her. I asked her if this was really about us, or if it was about her not being able to handle the idea of me doing well without her. That hit a nerve. She accused me of being selfish, of using this whole situation to boost my ego instead of focusing on saving our marriage. She even threw it in my face that I'd been out late, dressing better, and acting like someone who thought he was too good for her. That part actually stung a little, not because it was true, but because it showed just how far apart we'd grown. She didn't see me as her husband anymore. She saw me as competition. I told her I'd think about it, about closing the marriage. But deep down, I already knew my answer. I wasn't ready to let go of the life I'd started to build outside of her. And the truth was, I wasn't even sure I wanted to try to fix things anymore. She must have sensed that because she started crying. Really crying. The kind of crying that makes you feel like a villain no matter how justified you think you are. I hated seeing her like that, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that she was only crying now because things weren't going her way. I didn't have the energy to argue with her that night, so I told her we'd talk more in the morning. But, lying in bed next to her, listening to her sniffle and try to hold back more tears, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. Whatever we had before this mess, it was already gone, and no amount of regret on her part was going to bring it back. The morning after her breakdown, things felt different. She barely spoke to me while we got ready for the day, and I didn't push it. Honestly, I was relieved to have a little breathing room. But even as I went through the motions at work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. It was like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, and all it would take was one more push to send everything over. That push came a week later. I had started looking into divorce attorneys quietly, just to see what my options were. I wasn't 100% committed to going through with it yet, but I needed to be prepared. Meanwhile, she was trying, really trying, to act like everything was fine. She started cooking dinner more often, leaving little notes in my lunch, and even suggesting we plan a weekend getaway. It felt forced, and maybe that's why it didn't work. I couldn't unsee what had already happened. I couldn't forget the nights she spent out with other people while I sat at home feeling like a backup plan. And I definitely couldn't forget the way she panicked when the tables turned and I started living my own life. The final straw came when she brought up closing the marriage again. This time she wasn't asking, she was begging. She told me she couldn't stand the way things felt between us anymore, and that she just wanted to go back to the way things were. I told her no. I didn't yell, I didn't get angry, I just said no, and her face completely fell apart. She accused me of punishing her, of dragging things out just to hurt her. I told her that wasn't it at all. I just didn't think we could fix what was already broken. She stormed out of the house that night and I started making calls. By the end of the week, I had hired an attorney and started the paperwork. Serving her the divorce papers was one of the hardest things I've ever done. She didn't see it coming. Even after everything that had happened, she thought we were still in the working it out phase. So when I handed her the envelope, she just stared at it like it couldn't possibly be real. And then she snapped. I left the house that day to avoid the blow-up I knew was coming, but it didn't matter. When I came back, the place was trashed. She broke dishes, ripped up papers, and smashed 2 of my watches. She even took a knife to a pair of dress shoes I had left in the closet. I recorded everything. I didn't touch a single thing before taking pictures and videos, and then I called my lawyer. He told me to keep calm and let him handle it. That wasn't easy, especially when she refused to leave the house. I ended up packing a few bags and staying with a friend while things cooled down, but even then I couldn't stop thinking about the damage she'd done, not just to my stuff, but to us. By the time we went to court, I was done feeling guilty. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming I had emotionally abandoned her and used the open marriage as an excuse to humiliate her. She even threw out accusations of abuse. But when the judge asked for proof, pictures, hospital records, anything, she had nothing. My lawyer tore her arguments apart. He showed the messages where I had made it clear from the beginning that I didn't want the open marriage, that I had only agreed to make her happy. He showed the photos of the damage she caused and highlighted the financial support I had given her business over the years. By the end of it, she looked drained, like she knew she had already lost. The judge ruled in my favor. I kept the house. She had to pay for the damage she caused, and there was no spousal support. I even got my legal fees covered. Walking out of that courtroom felt surreal, like I was finally free from something I didn't even realize had been weighing me down for years. But the craziest part, after all of that, I still felt a little sad. Not because I missed her, but because it was so obvious that we'd reached a point where there was nothing left to save. That realization hit harder than anything else. Walking out of that courthouse should have felt like the end of something, and in a way it was. But more than anything, it felt like the start of something completely different. I didn't expect to feel as calm as I did. No anger, no regret, just this weird sense of relief, like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for too long. I went back to the house later that day, alone this time. She had already moved out, which made things easier, but it was still strange walking into a space that used to feel like ours and realizing it was just mine now. Her stuff was gone, but the echoes were still there. The faint scent of her perfume, the framed photos we hadn't taken down yet, the little notes she used to leave on the fridge. I thought it would feel emptier, but it didn't. It felt lighter. The first thing I did was get rid of the photos. Not out of spite. I just didn't need them anymore. Then I cleaned up the mess she left behind. I wanted the house to feel like mine, not a reminder of what fell apart. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until I didn't have to anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about how to fix things, how to make her happy, or how to keep our lives together. I could finally focus on myself. And I did. I threw myself into work harder. I started collaborating more, networking, and even taking opportunities I used to shy away from, because they might have upset her schedule or plans. I went to more conferences, met more people, and built connections that felt meaningful instead of transactional. One of the biggest surprises was how much my social life kept growing. The people I'd met during the whole open marriage experiment didn't fade away. If anything, those relationships got stronger. They weren't just placeholders to pass the time, they were genuine friendships that stuck. I didn't jump into dating right away, though I had plenty of opportunities. I wasn't in a rush. I think part of me just needed to figure out who I was outside of the marriage before bringing someone else into the picture. That didn't stop her from trying to stay in my orbit. She texted me every now and then, usually under the pretense of asking about paperwork or something practical, but it always turned into something else. She'd start reminiscing about our good times or asking if I was seeing anyone. I could tell she was fishing, but I didn't bite. The last time we spoke, she flat out admitted she regretted everything. She said she hated the person she became and that she still loved me. I didn't know what to say to that, so I kept it short and polite. I wasn't angry anymore, but I also wasn't interested in giving her hope. Looking back, it's crazy how much changed in such a short time. A year ago, I was bending over backward trying to save a marriage that was already broken. Now I feel like I'm finally living my life on my own terms. I won't pretend it's been perfect. There are still moments when it hits me, when I think about how much time we spent together and wonder if we could have avoided all of this. But then I remember how much I gave and how little I got back in return. I don't regret walking away. If anything, I regret not doing it sooner. The truth is, the open marriage didn't destroy us. It just exposed what was already there. Two people who had grown apart but were too scared to admit it. I don't know what her future looks like. And honestly, I don't care. All I know is that I'm finally in a place where I don't have to explain myself or compromise who I am to keep someone else happy. And that's something I'm never giving up again. Sometimes, late at night when the house is completely quiet, I sit on the back porch with a glass of whiskey and let myself feel everything I didn't allow myself to feel while it was happening. The anger comes first, still sharp after all this time, but it's no longer aimed at her. It's aimed at the version of me who thought love meant swallowing every insult, every boundary crossed, every piece of my dignity she chipped away. I'm angry that I spent 11 years auditioning for a role in my own life, terrified that if I stopped performing, the curtain would fall and I'd be left alone. That fear kept me small. Her suggestion of an open marriage didn't break me. It simply held up a mirror and forced me to see how much of myself I had already surrendered just to keep the peace. Then the sadness rolls in, softer now, almost nostalgic. Not for her, God, no, but for the man I used to be before I learned to make myself smaller to fit beside someone else's ego. I grieve the years I spent scanning her face for approval instead of looking in the mirror and asking, what do I actually want? I mourn the evenings I could have spent writing, traveling, laughing with friends, but instead wasted waiting for her to come home, or wondering why my best efforts were never quite enough. That grief doesn't drown me anymore. It just reminds me how precious time is, and how fiercely I now protect mine. After the sadness fades, gratitude shows up, uninvited and overwhelming. I'm grateful for every sleepless night that taught me I could survive discomfort. I'm grateful for the humiliation that finally burned away the people-pleasing part of me. I'm grateful for the day I looked at her crying on the couch, begging to go back, and realized I didn't want to go back, not even a little. That was the moment I understood freedom isn't something you're given, it's something you take when you finally stop asking permission to feel whole. I no longer flinch when I think about the open marriage conversation. It used to feel like a knife in the ribs, but now it feels like the starting gun of a race I didn't know I was allowed to run. The funniest part, she thought she was setting herself free that night at the kitchen table. In reality, she handed me the key to a cage I didn't even know I was in. Once the door swung open, there was no chance in hell I was walking back inside. People sometimes ask if I'm bitter. The answer is no. Bitterness requires energy I refuse to give her. She's a chapter, not the book. She's the storm that tore the roof off so I could finally see the sky. I don't hate her, I thank her. Without her selfishness, I might never have discovered my own strength. Without her indifference, I might never have learned how fiercely I could love myself when I stopped waiting for someone else to do it first. These days, I wake up excited. Not the manic kind of excited, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing every choice is mine. I say yes to trips on a whim. I say no without explaining myself. I flirt because it's fun, not because I need validation. I cook for one and actually enjoy my own company. I leave parties early or stay until sunrise, whatever feels right in the moment. There is no one keeping score, no one waiting to be disappointed, no silent ledger of sacrifices I'm expected to repay. The air in this house feels different now, lighter, like it's breathing with me instead of against me. I've started dating again, slowly, deliberately. The difference is staggering. I no longer audition. I show up as I am, flawed, opinionated, ambitious, occasionally moody, deeply kind, and unwilling to shrink. And you know what? The right people don't ask me to. They move closer. They match my energy instead of draining it. I laugh louder than I used to, because I'm no longer afraid of taking up space. If I could go back to that night at the kitchen table, I wouldn't fight her. I wouldn't beg or reason or try to fix anything. I'd simply look her in the eye and say, "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." I wish you well, but I'm done. Then I'd stand up, walk out the door, and never look back. I didn't have the courage then. I do now. To every man sitting where I once sat, terrified that saying no will cost you everything, it won't. Saying no will cost you the version of yourself who doesn't know his own worth, and that version was never worth keeping. The real cost is staying, shrinking, pretending, performing, until one day you wake up and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. I lost a marriage, I found a life, and I would make the same choices 1,000 times over, because the man writing this, sipping whiskey on his own porch, laughing at his own jokes, planning adventures that belong only to him, is the man I was always meant to become. She didn't break me. She set me free. And I have never been more grateful to be alone than I am right now, because for the first time in my life I am truly, completely, unapologetically not alone. I'm with myself, and that is the greatest love story I've ever lived.